You ever felt her energy shift but couldn't explain why? Like she was there but already gone? And most men don't realize they're losing a woman until her silence becomes louder than her words. It's not when she stops loving you, it's when she stops explaining herself, when her patience turns into distance and her warmth becomes cold logic. The real heartbreak? It begins when you think everything's fine, but she's already grieving the version of you that never showed up. This video isn't just a warning, it's a mirror. We'll explore the subtle, spiritual, and psychological signs that she's slipping away and why your awareness is the only way back. If you're ready for truth, clarity, and transformation, keep watching. Have you ever felt like no matter how calmly or clearly you try to explain your heart, she just doesn't get it? Or worse, she doesn't care to? You find yourself repeating the same words, offering your side, expressing how much it hurts, but it's like screaming into a void. Every explanation starts feeling like a silent plea not to be abandoned, and in that moment, the truth creeps in. You're not being heard. You're being tolerated. Now pause and really sit with this. What are you giving away every time you over-explain yourself to someone who isn't even listening? Your peace? Your self-worth? Your emotional power? That deep need to be understood often disguises itself as love, but sometimes it's just fear in a romantic costume. The fear of being forgotten, dismissed, left behind. But here's the shift that changes everything. The day you stop explaining yourself to her is the day you start protecting yourself. Imagine this, she texts something dismissive or shows up emotionally absent again, and instead of chasing clarity, you sit with your silence. Not out of punishment, but out of protection. You don't need to explain why her coldness hurts. You already know it hurts. You don't need her to agree that you've been loyal. You already are. And suddenly, your silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. This isn't a game. This is reclaiming your inner voice. A woman begins to realize she's losing you when she notices the emotional noise is gone. When you're not defending, not apologizing for having feelings, not trying to fix things she broke, your peace becomes suspicious, your stillness feels like distance, and she starts asking herself questions you once begged her to consider. Have you been so focused on being understood that you forgot how to understand yourself? What if your healing isn't in her validation, but in your boundaries? What if your next step is less about being seen and more about seeing yourself fully? This path isn't easy. It requires strength to walk away from the need to be right in her eyes and step into being real in your own. But it's worth it, because the man who chooses his peace over performance, his calm over chaos, becomes unshakable. And that version of you, grounded, centered, unapologetically whole, isn't just hard to lose, he's unforgettable. Have you ever wondered why she only starts noticing you again the moment you stop making her your entire world? Why is it that your attention, your effort, your love, when given fully and consistently, start becoming invisible to her? It's one of the most painful realizations a man can have, that the more available you are, the more she takes you for granted. But here's the deeper truth. When you stop prioritizing her over yourself, everything begins to shift. This doesn't mean neglect or revenge. It means balance. It means recognizing that you've made her the center of your orbit for far too long, and in doing so, you slowly drifted away from your own gravity. Think about it. How often have you delayed your dreams, your peace, your silence, just to keep her comfortable? How often have you walked on emotional eggshells, sacrificed your masculine edge just to avoid conflict? That constant giving without reciprocation doesn't make you more loving, it makes you more lost. But something powerful happens when you start redirecting that energy inward. When you start going to the gym, not for her, but for you. When you stop texting first, not as a tactic, but because you're finally too focused on your own growth to obsess over someone else's absence. When your plans no longer revolve around her, but around your purpose, your friends, your solitude. This shift is subtle but seismic. She feels it. She sees you less emotionally available, not colder, just clearer, not detached, but no longer dependent. And that's when the confusion hits her. Why is he no longer chasing me? Why does his attention feel scarce now? You didn't disappear, you just came back to yourself. The hard part? You'll feel guilt. You'll feel doubt. But pause and ask yourself, what have you sacrificed in the name of love? That was actually self-abandonment. Are you loving her at the cost of yourself? Healing doesn't come from withholding love. It comes from reclaiming balance, from remembering that you're not here to be her emotional crutch. You're here to walk beside someone who sees you, not just when you pull away, but every day you show up as yourself. So if she's starting to realize she's losing you, it's not because you became colder, it's because you became wiser. And that wisdom, brother, will lead you home to peace, to power, to a version of you that no longer needs to beg for love. You become the love, you become the standard, and that is unshakable. Have you ever caught yourself endlessly replaying conversations, wondering if you said too much or didn't say enough, while the woman you care about seems to barely notice your inner chaos? Why does it feel like the more you try to make it work, the more she drifts away, and the less you try, the more curious she becomes? That's the painful paradox, isn't it? But here's the truth few men are ever taught. A woman often realizes she's losing you, not when you fight to keep her, but when you stop fighting altogether and start building you. Think about it. When was the last time you poured into your purpose instead of her silence? When was the last time you woke up driven, not by anxiety about her, but by hunger for your own goals, your mission, your identity? The version of you that existed before the confusion, the emotional chaos, the second guessing. There is an unexplainable energy in a man who chooses his path over his pain. A man who stops chasing answers from someone who can't even hear the questions he's been screaming in his own mind. When you channel your energy toward your purpose, your fitness, your finances, your future, you stop asking for clarity because you become clear. This isn't about ego, it's about alignment, about returning to the grounded, mission-driven man you were before you started bending to fit someone else's comfort zone. And the moment you do, that's when she senses the shift. That's when she notices the emotional supply has been redirected, not out of malice, but from self-respect. You're not cold, you're focused. You're not distant, you're determined. You're not cruel, you're becoming complete. And that completeness, it's magnetic. Not because it draws her back, but because it draws you back to yourself. So ask yourself, are you waiting for her to notice your pain? Or are you ready to build a life so fulfilling that her validation no longer defines your day? Brother, healing isn't passive. It's a decision, a daily choice to rise, to focus, to grow. Not in bitterness, but in boldness. A man on purpose is a man no one forgets. And whether she realizes it too late or not at all, you'll already be miles ahead, anchored, whole, and no longer searching for peace in someone else's approval. That's the real win. That's the real you. Why does it feel like the more available you are, the more invisible you become? There's a silent pain in being the man who always shows up. The one who answers her late night texts, forgives the mood swings, patiently waits for clarity that never comes. And yet somehow your presence starts to feel expected, even taken for granted. But here's the shift that changes everything. A woman often realizes she's losing you, not when you're at her feet, but when you stop being so easy to reach. Let's be honest. Constant availability may feel like love, but it often signals a lack of boundaries. And deep down, you know this. You've felt it. That moment when your soul whispers, she's not meeting you where you are because you've never asked her to. You've built bridges to her heart while she's barely opened the door. But what happens when you stop overextending? You create space, and in that space, a powerful realization begins for both of you. You stop texting first. You take longer to reply, not out of spite, but because your energy is now directed inward. You choose the gym, the book, the business plan, instead of waiting for her attention. And slowly, something shifts, not just in her, but in you. Your silence becomes louder than your words. Your absence becomes a mirror she can't look away from. Because here's the paradox most men never learn. When you stop making her the center of your universe, she finally sees the gravity of your presence. This doesn't make you heartless. It makes you whole. A man who values his time, his peace, and his standards becomes a man no one forgets. You're no longer dancing to earn affection. You're grounded in who you are, and that changes the dynamic completely. Ask yourself, have I been so available that I've lost my value in her eyes? Or am I ready to reclaim my worth by stepping back? You're not punishing her. You're protecting your energy. You're not playing games. You're setting boundaries. You're not withdrawing love. You're choosing self-respect. And the beautiful thing is, this doesn't just help her realize what she's losing. It helps you realize what you deserve. So step back, not in silence, but in strength. Let her feel the weight of your absence, not because you want her to hurt, but because you're finally ready to heal. And in that healing, brother, you become the version of you that no woman can ignore and no heartbreak can shake. Why does it feel like no matter how much you give, she only sees what you lack? There comes a point in every man's life when he realizes that trying harder isn't the answer. It's the problem. You've bent over backwards, explained your feelings, over-communicated, compromised beyond reason, and still she pulls away. But what if the very thing that makes her realize she's losing you is not what you say, but what you stop explaining? When you stop justifying your worth, something powerful happens. You stop feeding the cycle of trying to be enough for someone who can't even see your value. And that silence, that internal alignment becomes your loudest message. Think about it. What if the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all? What if stepping away from the emotional chaos isn't weakness, but wisdom? You're not retreating, you're reclaiming. Because when a man stops explaining himself to someone who doesn't truly listen, he begins listening to himself. You no longer over-explain why you need peace. You stop defending your boundaries. You simply live them. You don't chase clarity from her. You become clear with yourself. That shift is magnetic. Because the truth is, when you step into quiet confidence, it disrupts the pattern she thought she controlled. You become unpredictable, not in a toxic way, but in a healed way. You're no longer seeking her validation. You're busy validating your own goals, your own standards, your own life. And in that shift, she starts to notice, really notice. She begins to feel the absence of the man who once over-explained himself into emotional exhaustion. So ask yourself, why am I trying so hard to be understood by someone who never really heard me? What would happen if I just chose myself instead? When you stop over-explaining, you protect your peace. You protect your power. You show, not tell. And that, brother, is how a woman realizes she's losing a man of true value. Not when he yells, not when he begs, but when he becomes unbothered, when he outgrows the conversation. You're not giving up on love, you're giving up on overextending. And in that surrender, you rise, you heal, you attract a life where your worth is not debated, it's respected. Remember, choosing yourself is not selfish. It's the beginning of becoming the man you were always meant to be. Keep going. You're not losing her. You're finding you.